The Trump administration firing back at its critics as outrage grows over reports of children being separated from their parents after crossing the border illegally. All this as the White House works with Congress to try and get immigration legislation nailed down this week. Good morning. I'm Sandra Smith, live inside America's Newsroom.
And good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Eric.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Sean in for Bill Hemmer this morning. You know, the outrage is growing over nearly 2,000 undocumented children who've been reportedly being held in the detention centers after illegally entering the country. With several Democratic lawmakers and others arguing the separations are cruel and un-American, demanding an end to the policy after touring a detention facility in southern Texas.
The zero tolerance policy means zero humanity, and it makes zero sense.
It's a disgrace, it's shameful, and it's un-American. President Trump, cease and desist, because you are moving the arc of justice to the heap of despair.
That is appalling, and it is un-American.
But Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen saying she is fed up with the irresponsible media saying that we do not have a policy of separating families at the border. Period. Let's bring in White House correspondent Kevin Corke. He joins us live from the North Lawn. Kevin, how is the White House responding to the criticism that the president is responsible for this policy?
Sandra, there are a couple of ways to look at this from the White House's perspective. First of all, they remind us that this, from their vantage point, is just the latest example of Democrats spending a lot of their political capital and their energy on people who don't belong here, people who are not legally here, versus taking care of American citizens. The other way they're looking at this is simply, this is in Congress's court. The ball is theirs. They can fix this with specific legislation, and the president has demonstrated he is open to taking a look at that. Let me take you to Twitter. The president, just not too long ago, saying this: why did the Democrats give us the votes to fix the world's worst immigration laws? Where's the outcry for the killings and crime being caused by gangs and thugs, including MS-13 coming into our country illegally? Former First Lady Laura Bush, a vocal critic of the separations, writing this in an op-ed over the weekend. I think you'll find this instructive. She said, I appreciate the need to enforce and protect our international boundaries, but this zero-tolerance policy is cruel, it's immoral, and it breaks my heart. But exactly how, or for how long, and for what reasons the separations may be happening, well, frankly, that's still up for debate. But Secretary of Homeland Security thinks that the Democrats and their partners in the media are misleading the folks at home. Here's what Secretary Nielsen had to say on Twitter. She said, this misreporting by members, press, and advocacy groups must stop. It's irresponsible and unproductive. As I've said many times before, if you're seeking asylum for your family, there's no reason to break the law and illegally cross between ports of entry. On Capitol Hill, Democrats calling out the Trump administration for what they are calling its zero-tolerance policy toward illegal immigration.
What the administration is doing is they're using the grief, the tears, the pain of these kids as mortar to build their wall. And it's an effort to extort a bill to their liking in the Congress.
It's not the law. It's the president's policy. In fact, he has stated, it's been reported in the press, that he's using it as a negotiation tool. He's using it to intimidate families so they don't come across the border.
Interesting. You're going to hear people ask the question, is it the law or is it not? Or is it merely enforcement of existing law? That's what the White House is arguing, Sandra.
Meanwhile, Kevin, where does the president stand on this McCall-Goodlatte bill that seems to be getting so much attention?
Yeah, no firm commitments, to be blunt. I mean, we've seen him talk about it both positively and then express some reservations. Let me share for the folks at home exactly what you're talking about. It's getting a lot of buzz on Capitol Hill because it effectively does a number of things that the president would like to see happen. It ends the visa lottery. It ends chain migration. It provides funding for the wall and border security, and most notably it provides a solution for DACA. But the latter, Sandra, seems to be the most controversial because critics don't want so-called amnesty for more people regardless of their status. But at least for now, the White House says it's listening.
The president is ready to get meaningful immigration reform across the board. Nobody likes seeing babies ripped from their mother's arms. This is a perilous journey for many of these children, and if people really cared about them, we would figure out a way to get the funding to expand the centers and to close the loopholes.
Kellyanne Conway over the weekend on Meet the Press. A couple of senators from West Virginia and Alabama, Messrs. Shelby and Capito, both coming here to the White House today. This is a conversation, Sandra, that will only get more heated as we go along, but it's certainly a circumstance the White House is hoping to solve. Sandra?
We've got Chairman Goodlatte coming up a little bit later on this morning. Kevin Cork, live at the White House for us. Thank you.
And in the other big story today, just days after the release of that bombshell report on the Clinton email probe, we will soon be hearing from its author, that is Inspector General Michael Horowitz, as well as FBI Director Christopher Wray. Both are set to testify later on this afternoon. They'll be appearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee about the FBI's mistakes in its handling of that investigation and the apparent anti-Trump bias on the part of several of the lead investigators.
Peter Strzok, you name it, the highest level of bias I've ever witnessed in any law enforcement officer. And Comey, in the words of my grandmama, has some explaining to do. He's having a hard time getting his stories to match up.
On every page, you find some evidence of political bias against Donald Trump, and that really calls into question the work that was done here with respect to the two highest profile investigations in recent times.
And Griff Jenkins now joins us live from Washington with more on what we can expect. So, Griff, we're going to hear a lot at today's hearing.
I think so, Eric. I think we're going to see a lot of fireworks on both sides of the aisle, to be honest with you, when Inspector General Horowitz defends his findings in that 568-page report that faulted FBI Director Comey for insubordination, but found no evidence of bias in his decision-making. Director Wray is expected to defend his agency's credibility and find ways to regain much-lost public trust, which Republicans who are up in arms over repeated instances of anti-Trump bias have resulted in the referral of 5 FBI agents to be investigated for administrative action, is even being touted by Democrats as something that is certainly concerning. Here's the Intel Committee ranking member Adam Schiff talking about just that.
Certainly these text messages are very troubling. The fact they were on work email, the fact that they were commingled with emails discussing business, all that's problematic. Again, the IG concluded that none of this affected decision making, but nonetheless, that was completely inappropriate.
And Democrats, Eric, will be pressing on whether the actions taken hurt Senator Clinton more than Donald Trump and may have cost her the election.
And meanwhile, Griff, after the Inspector General and the FBI Director finished their testimony today, they're going over to the other side of the Hill for more hearings tomorrow?
That's right. Horowitz and Wray aren't done. They're headed to a hearing that is a joint House Judiciary and Oversight and Government Reform hearing where we can expect Wray to face some actual heat from outstanding documents subpoenaed by Chairmans Goodlatte and Gowdy. They had a meeting on Friday. They are vowing serious consequences if the DOJ and FBI fail to comply. So that is something that the House chairmen say they will not put up with. Finally, just a note, because I know you have Chairman Goodlatte on a little bit later. He says that FBI agent Peter Strzok has told him he is willing to testify voluntarily. Perhaps we'll find out more on that today.
We will certainly ask Chairman Goodlatte that when he appears in a couple hours here. Thank you. Sandra?
Plus, the anti-Trump agent pulled off of the Mueller investigation says he is willing to testify before Congress. Peter Strzok's lawyer says his client is willing to testify before the House Judiciary Committee or any other congressional committee about the Bureau's investigations during the 2016 election. And this, of course, is coming after the president blasted Strzok on Twitter over the weekend, saying yesterday, why was the FBI sick loser Peter Strzok working on the totally discredited Mueller team of 13 angry and conflicted Democrats when Strzok was giving crooked Hillary a free pass, yet telling his lover, lawyer Lisa Page, that will stop Trump from becoming president? Witch hunt. Let's bring in Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor. Byron, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what does it mean that we could potentially hear directly from Peter Strzok?
What a difference an IG report makes. Members of Congress have been trying to hear from Strzok for a long time. The first public reports of Strzok being demoted because of his anti-Trump text, that was back in December of 2017. And members of Congress have been trying since then to get the FBI to allow him to speak. So in the better late than never category, this is something that a lot of Republicans are going to want to hear from Strzok.
Yeah, and his attorney says that Chairman Goodlatte pursuit of a warrant is wholly unnecessary because his client has been fully cooperative with the DOJ, Office of the Inspector General, and that he intends to voluntarily appear and testify before your committee. So what do you expect we will hear from him?
Well, I think the thing that members of Congress are going to want to find out is certainly there's just no question of the bias in the text that we saw between Strzok and Lisa Page when he said that we will stop Trump from being president. That's a big deal. But I think they're going to try to see if there's any connections between the bias that he had and the decisions that he made. In particular, there was a series of events in October of 2016 at the very height of the presidential campaign in which the Hillary Clinton email question had come back to the fore because of these emails that were discovered on Anthony Weiner's laptop. And then the Trump-Russia investigation was still going on, and Strzok decided he had to keep going with Trump-Russia and did not want to touch the Hillary email campaign. Was that because the Hillary email issue, was that because he didn't want to disrupt the campaign? What was that because of? If you notice in the Inspector General report, that is the one thing where the Inspector General said we cannot conclude that there was no bias in that decision.
So the president took a step further, Byron, in this Twitter storm over the weekend, saying the highest level of bias I've ever witnessed in any law enforcement officer, quoting Trey Gowdy, who you just heard from on the FBI's own Peter Strzok, said the president. Also remember that they all worked for Slippery James Comey and that Comey is best friends with Robert Mueller. A really sick deal, isn't it? So you just wonder what this all means. A few seconds left, Byron, for ultimately the investigation.
Well, on Fox News Sunday, Trey Gowdy was absolutely scathing about Strzok and Page, the FBI, and how that will affect the Mueller investigation. He said, you know, if you're a prosecutor in court and you're presenting evidence that was gathered by these biased people, good luck to you. And so I think the president latched onto those comments very quickly.
Well, the president making it very clear how he feels about Peter Strzok over the weekend series of tweets. Yeah, exactly. Byron York, good morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we, of course, will go in a lot deeper with all this. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Well, he is today's headliner. He joins us live at 10:30 Eastern. That's just over, well, 1 hour from now.
A lot of questions for him. And by the way, welcome to the new studio, Eric.
Yes, if some fancy digs.
I heard you walk through the door this morning. And
I did.
Sounded like you were impressed.
First time we're on the air. Great new home for America.
Good to have you here this morning.
Good to be here.
All right. Well, a strong earthquake rattling one large city. What we're learning about the damage it caused.
Plus, there's new information coming in about the suspects in that shooting at an all-night art festival where more than 20 people were injured last night.
And two bystanders disarming a suspect in the middle of a carjacking.
He is a hero. He is a hero. He took action, and like I said, I really think more people could easily have been shot. He saved us all, probably. I mean, come on, he saved us all.
There's going to be action on the floor of the House this week if the FBI and DOJ do not comply with our subpoena requests. We're going to get compliance, or the House of Representatives is going to use its full arsenal of constitutional weapons to gain compliance.
So if documents do not begin to be turned over tomorrow, and a clear way and path forward for everything else is not clear here in the next couple days, there's going to be hell to pay by Wednesday morning.
Hell to pay. Devin Nunes, Trey Gowdy, other top Republicans threatening serious action against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and other DOJ officials if that department does not hand over those outstanding documents that they're withholding on Russia and the Clinton probes. Can they do that? Judge Andrew Napolitano knows that. Senior Fox News judicial analyst, Your Honor.
Short word answer, yes.
Yes, they
can resist.
They can stonewall.
Yes.
They can prevent the American public. They can prevent the investigators from getting this important information.
Yes, because what they are seeking are documents in an active criminal file. If it's been presented to a grand jury, it's secret. If it shows the thought processes of investigators and prosecutors, it's secret. If it came from an informant that they promised not to name, it's secret. And the lawyers on the House Intelligence Committee know this. So here's what will happen. I don't know how this is going to turn out. They serve a subpoena on Rod Rosenstein. They literally hand him a subpoena. He gives it to his litigators and says, take this across the street to the federal court and move to quash the subpoena. And then the federal judge says, okay, show me the documents they're looking for and tell me why they can't be released. And if I agree with you, you can keep them. If I disagree with you, I'm going to turn them over to the House. That's the way it works. They're going to have to invoke the judicial branch in order to resolve this impasse.
And do you think that is the appropriate method to resolve this?
I do. Because the president is conflicted, since the president is the subject of this investigation. If he were not, he would call up his attorney general and say, hey, you work for me. These guys are our people. They're Republicans. Give them what they want. But he can't do that in this case. And the attorney general is conflicted and has recused himself from the case.
Besides the legality, do you think it's the executive branch, they just don't trust Congress?
Yes. Wow. Particularly this Congress, particularly this committee. I'm sorry to say it because he's a friend and I respect his work, particularly the chair of this committee. The FBI and the DOJ are afraid that if these documents, which show the origin of the investigation of Russian involvement, alleged Russian involvement in the Trump campaign, get in the hands of members of Congress who are allies of the president, they'll get in the hands of the president's lawyers. And these are things that the president's lawyers, while he's a subject of this investigation, are not permitted to see until they charge the president or exonerate him.
So finally, how will and when will the American people find out exactly how this investigation started?
Listen.
Find out, predate the dossier, find out what Strzok was doing, and find out who in the investigative authority at the FBI said, we got to go take a look at this.
Okay.
And whether it was legitimate and done properly or not.
If the DOJ complies with the subpoena, which I don't think they will for the reasons I've told you, we'll find out about the origins of this investigation, dossier, FISA, whatever it was, as soon as Congress wants to release it. If the DOJ does not comply with the subpoena and it goes to a court, Eric, you're talking about a month before we get to the bottom of this, before the court rules, and then whoever loses appeals it to a higher court.
All right, Judge. Wish they were giving it to you. You can rule on it.
You're so
good
kind.
to see you.
Pleasure to be with you.
Of course. Sandra?
All right, Eric, and stay tuned to America's Newsroom for more reaction on all of this from Capitol Hill. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte will be joining us coming up in the 11 o'clock hour. A lot of questions to ask him. Eric?
And there's a lot more to tell you about this morning. Heavy rains and intense flooding. Well, it's swamped parts of the Midwest. You know, it's caused dozens of sinkholes like that. And the threat, they say, may not be over as some of the rivers are continuing to rise.
Plus, American Brooks Koepka making history at the U.S. Open this weekend, 2 in a row.
Jack, do it again. We'll turn it round and round. You go back, Jack.
Temperatures begin to move through much of the country. You know, the upper Midwest, man, they're getting hit with severe weather. Heavy rain causing flash flooding over this weekend, making travel really dangerous. There have been dozens of sinkholes also forming from northern Minnesota and Wisconsin to upper Michigan. Look at that. And today, that storm system, well, it's expected to bring hail and winds of more than 60 miles per hour, so it's a tough beginning of the week for some of us.
Something. Meanwhile, this Fox News alert for you on a shooting at a New Jersey art festival. Prosecutors say the suspect killed by police was on parole, just released from prison on homicide-related charges. They say the early Sunday shooting, which injured 22 people, appears to be the result of a gang dispute.
It happened at 2:50 in the morning, and that one suspect was killed. So sadly, a lot of folks in Trenton saying that that arts festival, which went 24 hours all night, because this happened almost at 3 o'clock in the morning, was a chance to try and have the community get together and achieve something positive, but sadly, that happened in the community there, saying that they will continue and try to help the city of Trenton. Brian Yennis is live in Trenton with the very latest on this. Brian?
Hi, Eric. Actually, I'm in the newsroom today. I was in Trenton over the weekend, and prosecutors say this all-night art festival was not the target of an attack. Rather, innocent festival goers were caught in the crossfire of a gang dispute. Yesterday, Father's Day at 2:50 in the morning, gunshots rang out between gang members and chaos ensued in and outside a warehouse in Trenton, New Jersey. 22 people were injured, 17 were shot, including a 13-year-old boy whose condition has been upgraded from critical to stable. About 1,000 people were at the festival as bullets flew through the venue. Prosecutors believe some people were wounded by police bullets in the crossfire.
People just started running around like crazy and pushing and shoving, and then I heard the gunshots. It's sad that it was such a way to bring everybody together, and it's ruined.
One suspect, 32-year-old Tahij Wells, is dead. He was shot by police. Wells was released from prison in February on parole for homicide-related charges. 2 other suspects were wounded. Investigators say the night took a turn when fights broke out.
Prior to the shooting, members of the Trenton Police Department informed the event organizers that the event needed to be shut down. There was a report that the mood inside the venue had been changing.
Festival organizers were in the process of shutting the event down, Eric, but by then it was too late. Multiple firearms were recovered at the scene.
Yeah, a lot of controversy, the fact that that suspect was out on parole. Meanwhile, New Jersey's new governor, Phil Murphy, he's speaking out about the shooting. What is he saying?
Well, Governor Phil Murphy visited a Baptist church nearby, and he visited the scene yesterday. He spoke about the need to end gun violence, tweeting in part, quote, "We cannot let gun violence tear us apart. These are not inappropriate times to talk about gun policy. These are the most important times to talk about gun policy." The governor is holding a press conference at 11 a.m. today. Eric.
All right, Brian, maybe they should reconsider who they let out on parole sometimes. Thank you. Sandra?
Still ahead, a chase with Border Patrol in Texas ends in tragedy as an SUV filled with illegal immigrants flips over. Details on that straight ahead. Plus, outrage over the president's zero-tolerance policy ramping up. Everyone from the First Lady Melania Trump to Bill Clinton and even Laura Bush stepping into the fray. The RNC is here to react. Immigrants flips over. Details on that straight ahead. Plus, outrage over the president's zero-tolerance policy ramping up. Everyone from the First Lady Melania Trump to Bill Clinton and even Laura Bush stepping into the fray. The RNC is here to react.
Ball's in the courts of the Democrats. I mean, this is something they could fix right now if they came to the table and tried to offer a solution. What's inhumane is to allow laws in place currently on our books that promote and incentivize child smuggling.
Fox News alert on a deadly crash near the U.S. border. At least 5 people are dead and several others injured after an SUV packed with a dozen undocumented immigrants crashed trying to get away from Border Patrol agents. The driver was going about 100 miles per hour when he drove off the road, flipping the car. Authorities believe the driver and one passenger were U.S. citizens trying to smuggle immigrants into the country. It's a story that's becoming all too common.
It's not unusual at all. Absolutely not. It's a problem. This is, I think, a perfect example of why our borders need to be secure. It endangers American lives as well as those people from Mexico or other countries coming.
Well, 4 people died at the scene, and at least 1 person died after being transported to an area hospital.
Well, meanwhile, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, well, she and more than a dozen other Democrats are heading down to the border in a few hours from now. They will visit a facility that houses migrant children who have been separated from their parents after crossing the border
tolerance policy. Meanwhile, the immigration controversy is turning ugly, with liberal comedian Kathy Griffin taking a vicious swing at the First Lady. Melania Trump's office releasing a statement saying, quote, Mrs. Trump hates to see children separated from their families and hopes both sides of the aisle can finally come together to achieve successful immigration reform. She believes we need to be a country that follows all laws, but also a country that governs with heart. Griffin then tweeted out this profanity-laced message to the First Lady, which you can choose to read yourself, but it's a bit too ugly for me to read on the air, quite frankly. Let's bring in RNC spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany. So not only is this debate heating up, but it's turning downright ugly, Kayleigh.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, Kathy Griffin, she's a hateful, irrelevant provocateur. When she lost her job at CNN, she's now made a career out of attacking the Trump women. It is turning ugly. But what Melania said is what we're all saying. None of us want to see these separations at the border. President Trump has called it horrible. He said he does not want to see this either. And there's a very simple way to stop this. Nancy Pelosi, after you get done with your tour down at the border, looking at the facilities, get back to Washington and change the laws, because it's on you, Democrats, to allow this to continue.
You know, it's interesting, though, to then see this scathing opinion piece by Laura Bush on the policy. Many of us have had a chance to read it this morning. I'm sure you have as well, Kayleigh. And in it, she writes, quote, I live in a border state. I appreciate the need to enforce and protect our international boundaries. But this zero tolerance policy is cruel. It is immoral. And it breaks my heart, she wrote. And important to point out, as our reporting led into this, that it was her husband, the president, George W. Bush, who initiated the zero tolerance approach for illegal immigration, on which President Trump's policy is modeled.
Sandra, that's exactly right. The laws have not changed. Going back to the Bush era and the Obama era, families were separated in two cases, where the child was in danger or in the case that the adult is being prosecuted. You're right, the zero tolerance policy hasn't changed. This has always been the law. People are just making it an issue because this is the Trump administration. And a really important point in all of this is we have seen a 315% increase in people posing as families to try to cross the border. Those are traffickers, those are smugglers endangering immigrant children by using them to gain access to this country. It's a dangerous scenario, not safe for the children, also not safe for U.S. citizens who are being plagued by MS-13, which, by the way, the Washington Post called a ticking time bomb.
So Bill Clinton weighed in. He wrote this yesterday. On this Father's Day, I'm thinking of the thousands of children separated from their parents at the border. These children should not be a negotiating tool, and reuniting them with their families would reaffirm America's belief in and support for all parents who love their children. Now, we've heard from the White House, we've heard from the president, we heard from the First Lady even, and their hearts do break for these children. Do you see the president and his administration doing all that they can do, considering they don't like what they're seeing either?
They're doing all that they can do. And Rich Lowry had a fantastic piece over at National Review on this. He pointed out that this separation between the child and the parent typically only lasts a day if the immigrant chooses to go back to the country that they came from. The prosecutions are quick. They get an expedited removal order. They leave the country if they so choose. It's when the illegal immigrant decides to apply for asylum, and this Flores agreement demands that the child be released in 20 days. Nancy Pelosi, you can go back to Washington. You can change the policy. The Trump administration is enforcing the law, protecting U.S. citizens. I distinctly remember those parents crying during the State of the Union because they lost their kids to MS-13. We cannot allow illegal immigrants to cross the border, many of whom have ravaged the lives of U.S. citizens.
You know, our brain room digging up some of the statistics, just trying to bring up some of the numbers to give us some perspective at where things are today versus previous administrations. And at the time of the Obama administration, Kayleigh, the dramatic increase in the number of unoccupied children arriving at the border had reached a, quote, crisis proportion. This is according to a report from Migration Policy by June 2014, with a 90% surge in arrivals from 2013. This is a problem that previous administrations have faced. A lot is on the table this week. What gets done?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up about the unaccompanied minors, because as you know, we saw that surge in 2014. The Washington Post, pretty liberal newspaper, said that there has been an influx of 200,000 teenagers from Central America, and they are fueling this MS-13 crisis that is ravaging America's children in our schools. A man in Texas just died, and his body was burned by an unaccompanied minor who came here, got legal status, and then went out and became an MS-13 gang member. So we've got to make change, but we've got to get Democrats in the room, Sandra. We've got to get them across the table and say, let's fix this Flores agreement. Let's find a DACA fix. Instead of obstructing and engaging in publicity stunts, let's get this done for the American people and do it in a humanitarian way.
It's going to be a big week for that. We'll see what happens. Kayleigh McEnany, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Well, did you watch golf over the weekend? American Brooks Koepka winning the U.S. Open for the second year in a row. Well, that makes him the first golfer in 29 years to successfully defend his U.S. Open title, and happens to be only the 7th person